One day, James had to wait at the station till Edward and his train came in. This made him cross. Late again! Edward laughed and James fumed away. After James had finished his work, he went back to the yard and puffed onto the turntable. He was still feeling very bad-tempered. "Edward is impossible," he grumbled to the others. "He clanks about like a lot of old iron, and he is so slow, he makes us wait." Thomas and Percy were indignant. "Old iron? Slow? Why, Edward could beat you in a race any day." "Really?" said James. "I should like to see him do it." Next morning, James's driver was suddenly taken ill. He could hardly stand, so the fireman uncoupled James ready for shunting. James was impatient. Suddenly, the signalman shouted. There was James puffing away down the line. "All traffic halted," called the signalman. Then he told the fireman what had happened. Two boys were on James's footplate fiddling with the controls. Phew! They tumbled off and ran when James started. The signalman answered the telephone. "Yes? He's here. Right. I'll tell him. The inspector's coming at once. He wants a shunter's pole and a coil of wire rope." "What for?" wondered the fireman. "Search me, but you'd better get them quickly." The fireman was ready when Edward arrived. The inspector saw the pole and the rope. "Good man, jump in." We'll catch him, puffed Edward. James was laughing. What a lark, what a lark, he chuckled to himself. Suddenly, he was going faster and faster. He realized that he had no driver. "What shall I do? I can't stop! Help! Help!" We're coming, called Edward. Edward was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. At last, he caught up with James. "Steady, Edward," called his driver. The inspector stood on Edward's front, holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James's buffer. The engines swayed and lurched. At last, "Got him!" he shouted. He pulled the noose tight. Gently braking, Edward's driver checked the engine speed, and James's fireman scrambled across and took control. "So, the old iron caught you after all," chuckled Edward. "I'm sorry," whispered James. "Thank you for saving me." "You were splendid, Edward." "That's all right," replied Edward. The engines arrived at the station side by side. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting. "A fine piece of work," he said. "James, you can rest and then take your train. I'm proud of you, Edward. You shall go to the works and have your worn parts mended." "Oh, thank you, sir," said Edward. "It'll be lovely not to clank." One night, Henry and Gordon were alone with James. Although Sir Topham Hatt was beginning to think well of him, whenever a chance came, the other engines would talk of nothing but bootlaces. "Remember when they had to use a bootlace to get you out of trouble, James?" they would tease. James tried to get back by talking about Henry, who got shut up in a tunnel, and Gordon, who got stuck on a hill, but they wouldn't listen. You talk too much, little James, said Gordon. A fine, strong engine like me has something to talk about. I'm the only engine who can pull the express. When I'm not there, they need 2 engines. Think of that. I've pulled expresses for years and have never once lost my way. I seem to know the right line by instinct. Every wise engine knows that the signalman sets the switches to make the engines run on the right tracks. But Gordon was so proud he had forgotten. Wake up, James, said Gordon next morning. It's time for the express. What are you doing? Odd jobs? Ah, well, we all have to begin somewhere, don't we? Run along and get my coaches. Don't be late. James went to get Gordon's coaches. They were all shining with new paint. He was careful not to bump them, and they followed him smoothly into the station singing happily. We're going away! We're going away! I wish I were going with you, said James. I should love to pull the express and go flying along the line. Gordon, with much noise and blowing of steam, got ready to back onto the train. Sir Topham Hatt was on the train with other important people, and as soon as they heard the conductor's whistle, Gordon started. Look at me now, he puffed, and the coaches glided after him. Whoop, 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 whoop. Goodbye, little James. See you tomorrow. James watched the train disappear and then went back to work. He pushed some freight cars into their proper sidings and went to fetch the coaches for another train. James had just brought the coaches to the platform when he heard a mournful noise. There was Gordon trying to sneak into the station without being noticed. Hello, Gordon. Is it tomorrow? Gordon didn't answer. He just let off steam feebly. Did you lose your way, Gordon? No, it was lost for me. I was switched off the main line onto the loop. I had to go all round and back again. Perhaps it was instinct, said James. All the passengers were shouting at the ticket window, "We want our money back." Sir Topham Hatt climbed onto a cart and blew the conductor's whistle so loudly that they all stopped to look at him. Then he promised them a new train at once. Gordon can't do it. Will you pull it for us, James? Yes, sir. I'll try. So James was coupled on and everyone got in. Do your best, James, said Sir Topham Hatt. Come along, puffed James. You're pulling us well, sang the coaches. Hurry, 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 puffed James. Bridges and stations flashed by. The passengers cheered, and they soon reached the station. Everyone said thank you to James, and Sir Topham Hatt was very impressed. Well done. Would you like to pull the express sometimes? Yes, please, answered James. Next day, when James came by, Gordon was pushing freight cars. I like some quiet work for a change, he said. I'm teaching these cars manners. You did well with those coaches, I hear. Good, we'll show them. And he gave his cars a bump. James and Gordon are now good friends. James sometimes takes the express to give Gordon a rest. Gordon never talks about bootlaces, and they're both quite agreed on the subject of freight cars.
Thomas the tank engine had been working in the coal yards all day. The little blue engine was covered in coal dust. "We can't clean you up tonight, Thomas," said his driver. "There's a problem with the hose pipe." "Bother," said Thomas. "A bath would make me feel much better. The others are sure to say I look silly." But the engines were too busy arguing to notice Thomas. James was talking loudest of all. "I deserve a new coat of paint. Sir Topham Hatt says I'm the pride of the line, and—" "Rubbish," huffed Henry. "We're all the pride of the line." "It's been like this all day," confided Percy to Thomas. "James is getting a new coat of paint and won't stop boasting about it." "Why, James? I'm the one who needs a new coat. Look at me." "I'd rather not," retorted James. "You're not a pleasant sight, and wouldn't understand the needs of a really important engine." Thomas was fuming. Next morning, as James was being repainted, Henry had an accident. If you can't push cars properly, Henry, why not talk to a tree instead? You know how much you like the forest.
As a matter of fact, bossy boiler, Sir Topham Hatt is inspecting the island for trees that are too close to the line. He's worried they might cause trouble.
Pah! Laughed James. If I came upon a tree, I'd just push it aside.
Really?
Henry replied. Soon James was showing off his paintwork. Make way for an important engine. You wouldn't feel important if one of those trees crashed on you. You'd feel hurt, reproached Percy. Rubbish! It wouldn't dare! You should be careful, James. Trees can be just as powerful as engines. Oh, please. Now, excuse me, Sir Topham Hatt needs me to pull the express. And he huffed away. But James was wrong. You must go to the yards and collect an important goods train, James. It's heavy, so be careful, said Sir Topham Hatt. But, sir, I've just been repainted. Can't Thomas or Percy do it? They're dirty and like working with freight cars. Really useful engines don't argue. So James didn't. By the time he arrived at the yards, the weather had changed for the worse. Your color's nice, James. Pity about your face, though, said a freight car. James ignored them and set off. Soon they came to a hill, and his driver knew they were in for a difficult time. An old tree close to the track was being blown by the strong winds, and the rain had weakened the slope. All of a sudden, the tree moved. Oh, help! Cried James. Go away! But of course, the tree couldn't. James tried to reverse away from the tree, but his train was too heavy. Then he heard a whistle. It's Thomas, called his driver. James felt embarrassed and worried that Thomas would laugh at him, but Thomas didn't. He knew this was no time for teasing. Beep, beep. I'm ready, whistled Thomas. So am I, replied James. As ready as I'll ever be. They were just in time. Later, James spoke to Thomas. Percy was so right to warn me. Thank you for rescuing me, Thomas. Oh, that's all right. We engines must pull together, whatever the weather. Just then, Edward bustled in. Sir Topham Hatt thinks you're both brave engines. Thomas, you're going to have a new coat of paint. And James, Sir Topham Hatt says that tomorrow you'll pull the Special Express. Everyone was very happy.
Monster! Oh, monster! Come out, wherever you are!
James, wait! This is not a good idea. It isn't brave not to be careful, James. It's silly.
That's just what I'd expect a scaredy engine to say.
James, wait! Come back! It isn't safe! Thomas was right.
Percy? Percy! Nobody can say I'm the scaredy engine now. I mean, I don't see any other engines up here. Nothing to be frightened of at all.
There was something poking out of the rocks up ahead, and it looked like...
The monster! The monster! The monster!
The monster?
I saw it! Oh!
guess he had to move back to get away from the danger. Then there was trouble.
No, James! Go forward! It's a landslide! Percy! You have to get out of there! James needs my help. I must be brave. Percy! No! Go forward!
The monster!
No! Forward!
The monster!
A landslide!
Landslide? Huh?
Meant to do that. Help! They're pushing me! They're pushing me! James!
Thomas! Thomas! Come back!
Oh dear! Help! I don't want to go any faster! My brakes! No! Stop! I want to stop! Oh, Thomas! Use your brakes! Use your brakes! I can't! My brake blocks are on fire! They're made of wood! I'm going to try to couple up behind you, James! I'm going to try to slow you down! Hurry, Thomas! Couple me up! Couple me up! I need to slow James down! Oh no! Try again! Try again! We mustn't give up! We have to try! Faster! Faster! Coming off the Edward was right. Cars can run an engine right off the rails. Stay right there, James. I'll go and get help.
James had not seen the Fat Controller for several days. He was left alone for being naughty, and was not even allowed out to push coaches and trucks in the yard. Oh dear, he thought, I shall have to stay in the shed for always, and no one will see my red coat again. All because I went so fast I made a hole in one of my coaches that had to be mended with, of all things, a passenger's bootlace. At last the Fat Controller arrived. I see you are sorry, James, he said. I hope now that you will be a better engine. You have given me a lot of trouble. People are laughing at my railway, and I don't like that at all. I'm very sorry, sir, said James. I will try hard to behave. That's a good engine, said the Fat Controller. I want you to pull some trucks for me. James was delighted and puffed away. Here are your trucks, James, said Thomas. Have you got some bootlaces ready? And he ran off, laughing. Oh, said the trucks. We want a proper engine, not a red monster. James took no notice and started as soon as the guard was ready. Come along, he puffed. We won't, screamed the trucks. But James didn't care, and he pulled the screeching trucks sternly out of the station. The trucks tried hard to make him give up, but he still kept on. Sometimes their brakes would slip on, and sometimes their axles would run hot, and each time the trouble had to be put right. And each time James would start again, determined not to let them beat him. Give up, you can't pull us, you can't, called the trucks. I can and I will, puffed James. And slowly but surely, he pulled them along the line. At last they saw Gordon's Hill. Look out for trouble, James, warned his driver. We'll go fast and get them up before they know it. Don't let them stop you. So James went faster, and soon they were halfway up. I'm doing it, he panted. Will the top never come? Then, with a sudden jerk, it all came easier. I've done it, he puffed. Hooray! It's easy now. But his driver shut off steam. They've done it again. We've left our tail behind. Look. The last trucks were running backwards down the hill. The coupling had snapped. But the guard stopped the trucks and got out to warn approaching engines. That's why it was easy, said James, as he backed the other trucks carefully down. What silly things trucks are. There might have been an accident. Shall I help you, James? Called Edward. No, thank you, answered James. I'll pull them myself. Good. Don't let them beat you. You're doing well, whistled Edward, as James slowly struggled up the hill. I can do it, he puffed. He pulled and puffed as hard as he could. I've done it, he panted. They reached their station safely, and James was resting in the yard when Edward pulled up. Peep, peep, he whistled. Then James saw the Fat Controller. Oh dear, what will he say, he asked himself. But the Fat Controller was smiling. I was in Edward's train and I saw everything, he said. You've made the most troublesome trucks on the line behave. After that, you deserve to keep your red coat.
So James puffed onto Gordon's line. Then he raced across the countryside. James rattled over bridges and clattered through tunnels. He really wanted to get in front of Edward. James puffed back onto Edward's line. It worked, laughed James. I'm first. Suddenly, the signal turned red. James applied his brakes and screeched to a halt. But Edward couldn't stop in time. Sorry, puffed Edward. I didn't have time to stop. Don't worry, moaned James. It was my fault for pushing in.
1, 2, 3, go! sorry, Henry.
Oh, James forgot all about being careful. And then there was trouble.
Oh, no! I can't stop! Whoa, 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 whoa! Ah! Whoa, whoa! How's my paint looking? I'm really in trouble now.
You can say that again, James. I've told you many times about showing off and rushing about. And now, you've ruined the shed.
Hello, James. Looking forward to your special job tonight?
Yes, but I need to get to the washdown to clean up first, and I'm still not finished for the day.
Well, would you like me to do one or two of your jobs so you can finish early?
No thanks, Edward. I can manage. I told Sir Topham Hatt I can do all my work and the special tonight, and I will.
Oh, suit yourself.
James was exhausted, but excited, having been cleaned up at the washdown.
What is it?
Nothing, James. Just a little scratch on your paintwork.
Oh, a scratch. A scratch? That isn't nothing. I can't pick up the mirror looking like this.
James got ready to take the express when Gordon returned. Be careful, warned Gordon. The hills are slippery. You may need help. I don't need help on hills, replied James huffily. Gordon thinks he knows everything. Earlier, a storm had swept Gordon's hill, blowing leaves onto the tracks, which made them slippery. Even though the storm had passed, the hill was still difficult to climb. James knew this. The signal showed clear, and James began to go faster. I'll do it, he puffed. Halfway up, he was not so sure. I must do it. But his wheels slipped on the leaves. He couldn't pull the train at all. Help, help, whistled James. His wheels were turning forward, but the heavy coaches pulled him backwards. The whole train started slipping down the hill. His driver shut off steam and put on the brakes. Then carefully he stopped the train. Gordon saw everything. Ah, well, we live and learn. Never mind, little James. I'm going to push behind.